Donald Trump is arraigned in Washington, D.C. to the celebration of many of our friends on the left and to the detriment of our friends on the right. And we've got a lot to go over with that because it was the dominant news story of the day today, including some protests and some reactions to this as well. So we'll go over all things indictment today and talk about what's going on there. In other news, the Devon Archer testimony is released conveniently also today. We'll be talking about what has happened in the Devon Archer testimony, what this means for the Bidens, and what people are trying to spin it into. A coup in Niger has been taking place throughout the week as we are all distracted by the Trump news. We will talk a bit about that, including Biden coming in and making demands from the Niger military. I don't know, it can't be Nigerian, right? Because that's the ones that come from Nigeria. I don't even know what the demonym is for that, but we'll be talking about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that. And a U.S. District Court strikes down the pistol brace ban as Biden weighs whether or not to take this to the Supreme Court. That is not friendly to him. And it's going to be all of this and more, plus things I like and things that I hate, over here on Contemporary. Long and lean, and I forget the rest of the words. The girl from Ipanema goes walking. I should have been more prepared for that. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. I think most of you have figured out that I've been since the start of the show this past week, because the balloon reference has been dated. It's been dated for a while. So I've been trying to throw a song lyric in from something I was thinking of. And before I got started, while I was prepping up, I was thinking about the song, The Girl from Ipanema, and I froze on the spot. And I know this song, too, by the way. I've played the song, I can play it on guitar, I can play it on a couple of instruments. I can even string through it on bass. And, legitimately, I'm like, long and lean. No, that's not even a part of the song. Tall and tan and young and lovely. How do you forget that? But, anyway, we've got a lot to go over here today over on Contemporary. So, strap yourselves in, grab a snack, get some friends, tell 10 people about the fact that you're here watching today, and get some more people in here. We are live on all platforms: YouTube, DLive, Twitch, Rumble, Instagram, Kick. You can check us out on all of those platforms. Most of them are JEdgar101 or JEdgar102. We're live somewhere on Twitter, or X rather. I have no idea where, but we've got that going on as well. So come in. Live chat will get read throughout the show, including Foundations for Building and African is over on the Instagram side. Got the wave over there. Thanks for the love. You are welcome. Thanks for coming in and checking out the program. A lot of U.S. politics today. We've got the Mogwai over on the Twitch side holding down the fort, so that's going to be some fun. And, we've got to talk about this here. There's been a nonstop cringe fest on X today, too, by the way. Just absolutely nonstop. They think they've won. They think that this means that he's going to prison forever. And I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm going to talk just a bit about this before we get into everything else that we're going to be doing today. And before we start on the finance or anything else, I think they're going to try and JFK him. They are obsessed with getting him away from his security detail. And I've noticed that today in the rhetoric and everything that they are doing on there. That's all that I see. I will probably do that at some point. No, I'm probably going to do 99 Problems, but I might do the Barbie Girl one. I'm not going to see the movie, but absolutely not. But yeah, I could probably throw that lyric up there. But Let's get into it. Let's get started. Before we do, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, Silent Caster, Cloud World Chronicles with Papa Palpatine, and Overruled with KTZed. Go check out all that great programming as we aim to bring you a better news and culture experience from the common man for the common man. That is right. Stop getting your news and your culture and your information about the arraignment from people who wear suits that cost more than your houses. Get your news and culture from people who are just like you. And let's get into our finance so we can fly through that and get into the main news of the day. Our layoffs report today comes from my state, and it's actually in the UW system too. So we'll be talking about, hey, look, that's me. Now you can see how the sausage is made. All right, let's get into it. Let's get started. And we are going to start today with the Dow, which spent most of the day down today. It did peak above the line, like the little groundhog, about the middle of the day today. 1 to maybe 1:45 local time. Maybe 12:45 to 1:45 local time. It peaked above, but it is down again today, losing 66.63 points. So not really majorly down on the day, but still down to 35,215.89. That is down 0.19% on the day. We will see if this trends continue or if they have another record winning streak. We will see what's going on with that. Looking at your Bitcoin, was a little bit rougher of a day today, also peaking up above where it previously had closed at, but coming back down and bringing ourselves it's up today, but not by very much. $47 up on your Bitcoin if you do have a Bitcoin. I mean, if you've got a full Bitcoin, share a little bit of the wealth. Come on here. Well, I guess I don't have a crypto wallet for you to donate to, but still. Your Bitcoin is at $29,211 US dollars and 20 US cents. 0.16 up on the day. The gas prices in the Madison area are creeping back up to that $3.50 mark. We had a little bit of reprieve for a little bit, but they are creeping back up at this point here with a $3.36 outlier, still being the low price leader around the Madison area, $3.50 being the average with a couple $3.40s dotted in and out throughout there. So I hope that you were able to fill up on that brief little bit of reprieve. If you got them in your local market, remember these gas prices are not indicative of all markets out there. These are the gas prices for one particular market that we have been watching since the pandemic started. So check your local listings and see what your gas prices look like and use this as a sort of a pattern to see if they are going to go up and down. Let's grab our finance report for the day coming from CNBC. Willie's over here. Welcome. You're here to talk about the arraignment, I'm guessing. We talked about your prime minister yesterday. Futures were a little changed as investors weigh big tech earnings. Await key jobs data from Alex Herring. Futures are near flat Thursday night as Wall Street parsed the latest earnings from big-name technology companies in the run-up to a major employment report due Friday morning. Futures tied. The Dow gained just 0.1%. S&P and the NASDAQ also rose 0.1%. So we'll see a little bit of up in the markets. Hopefully, at the beginning of trading tomorrow, a deluge of earnings reports released after the bell sent individual stocks moving. Amazon jumped more than 9% after trouncing expectations on profit and offering positive guidance, while Apple lost more than 2% after revenue came in lower than it did in the same quarter a year ago. Beyond mega cap tech, Airbnb slid after the company said nights and experience booked grew at a slower rate than Wall Street anticipated. DraftKings and Dropbox rose about 12% and 3% respectively on the back of reports that exceeded analyst expectations. These are among the latest reports in this earnings season. More than 78% of the S&P 500 companies have given results, with about 80% surpassing Wall Street expectations according to FactSet. Traders will follow jobs data due Friday morning to further insights into the strength of the labor market and the economy. Investors are hoping slowed growth in hourly earnings can signal to the Federal Reserve that previous interest rates hikes have had their intended effect on the economy, according to Rob Hayworth, Senior Investment Strategist, Wealth Management at the U.S. Bank. I look at something like this here and I see a major disconnect between what the Biden admin and the people who cheer for the Biden admin are trying to tell you and what the Fed is trying to tell you. And it's always interesting to see where the outset is and what the difference is here, because, like, CNBC is coming out and telling you, hey, wages didn't climb to keep up with inflation, even with the reduced inflation stat that they keep touting over here. And yet, when I read the propaganda reports and the official White House releases, wages are going up so much higher than inflation is. Look how rich everybody is. We're doing fantastic. And I gotta err to CNBC on this one. I do. I really do. I did take a major wage increase this year, but results not typical. Basically, I came to a labor market that was very dry for my kind of work, to a point where I could come back and make demands, and left a labor market that was very saturated with my kind of works. So I was able to come back and make the demand, and I mean, there are still things that are moving for that. Can't really talk about them here right now, but there are some things that are moving with that. Economists polled by the Dow expect non-farms to grow by 200,000 in July. Meanwhile, the consensus estimate shows the unemployment rate should hold steady at 3.6. Economists are expecting average hourly wages to rise by 0.3% from June and 4.2% on an annualized basis, which is fine, and that keeps pace with what they tell me inflation is, but I don't necessarily buy that either. But what we're going to see with this is the fact that they didn't keep up with inflation the last time through. And it is a compounding effect. But that is what we see coming off of that. Let's look at our layoffs report for the day, coming from my home state of Wisconsin. UW Oshkosh layoffs furloughs announced to shrink $18 million deficit. From Todd Richmond. Officials at the UW Oshkosh plan to lay off scores of employees, offer early retirement deals, and impose furloughs as they grapple with a projected $18 million deficit, Chancellor Andrew Levitt announced on Thursday. 10 of the UW system's 13 four-year campuses are expected to face a combined $60 million deficit next summer. System officials announced in May UW leaders have blamed declining enrollment, a lack of state funding, and a 7-year tuition freeze that drained their reserves in shortfalls. Well, we've got a declining birth rate that pretty much started in my year of birth in '84, and it's just been slowly settling off since then. So, I mean, there are less people to go to college, and honestly, Oshkosh is towards the bottom of the UW system. I mean, people are trying to get into the UW system. They're going to Madison. They're not at the dead bottom that would go to Parkside, where I briefly went, before I realized it was worthless. But they are definitely towards the bottom, and people, again, they're picking up, they're leaving the Oshkosh area, and they're going to either UWGB. It's got to be hard with Oshkosh too, because UWGB is right there. If I'm driving, it's within an hour, but it's like an hour and 15 minutes away for a much better known and much better staffed and funded school. Otherwise, you've got St. Norbert's right there in De Pere too. So, yeah, that's one thing I gotta say is Oshkosh is between a rock and a hard place, both by convincing people to go there, and then also what's happening in Madison. Levitt's plan calls for shedding around 200 staff and admin through a combination of layoffs and early retirement buyouts. It also calls for employees to take furlough days starting this fall, with higher paid employees taking longer furlough periods. Levitt didn't offer additional details. Campus officials didn't plan to cut any faculty positions, Levitt said. They want to shield students from the deficit's impact. UW system data indicates drastic enrollment drops by underrepresented students. They're defined as students who are white, international students, or those with family heritage in Asian countries, well represented in the student body, such as China, Korea, and Japan. Enrollment by these students fell around 20%, from almost 160,000 in the fall of 2010 to just under 130,000 in the fall of 2022. System officials decided in December to close UW Richland Center, a 2-year campus, after enrollment there dropped by 90%. Yeah, like, most people don't even know that there is a UW well, technically there isn't anymore, but if you poll people entering college outside of Richland Center to ask them if there was a UW Richland Center, most of them would say no, because they have no idea. A rock and a cheese wheel. No, that's what they picked up at the border. I asked where they were storing one of those things, and nobody would tell me. I was asking for a friend. But 200 layoffs in the UW system in Wisconsin. But don't worry, everything's fine. All right, I know what we're all here for. It's in the title. And we're going to start with a little bit before everything happened today. So the arraignment was, if I remember correctly, about 3 o'clock local time. I mean, they're going to tell us in the articles as we go. I was working, of course, so I wasn't able to basically live tweet it and see what's going on with it. But it was about the end of my workday when I was just kind of glancing at Twitter while I was on the phone and see, oh yeah, no, they're starting to talk about the mugshot that he didn't get and the arrest and Jack Smith stared him down. But let's talk about it. We're going to start with CBS News today. Trump's arraignment on federal charges. Here's what to expect from Graham Cates. This obviously is before the arraignment. Former President Trump will be arraigned at the Elijah Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse in Washington, D.C. on Thursday afternoon on 4 felony charges related to his alleged efforts to remain in power following his loss in the 2020 election. Here's what you need to know ahead of the court hearings in the case. Some of this is going to be a review from the last couple days because we have been talking about it since the indictment dropped. The 45-page indictment, which is very dry. I have read the entire thing. Accuses Trump of conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. 3, which require intent, which I don't see as there, and a 4th one that does not require intent, just requires him to be there, and maybe tacked on just to make sure that they do get a conviction out of this. As was mentioned on indictment day, there is nothing about seditious conspiracy, insurrection, treason, or attempt to overthrow the U.S. government. There's talk about that in the indictment, but they're not bringing these charges forward, partially because I don't think that they can win. I don't think they can win on these charges. One of the things that's been talked about since indictment day is the 99.9999995.8% conviction rate out of federal court. And that means he's screwed. That means that this is a foregone conclusion, and he might as well just plead guilty. But again, we're sitting in a point where we've got 3 that require intent that may not be there, and none of the charges that we were promised we were going to get. This was going to be the one for insurrection, inciting the riot, and none of this is there. Conspiracy against rights refers to an effort to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate people from their constitutional or federal rights. In this case, the right to have a fairly counted vote. It's again, I've been listening to Shapiro on this one here. And it's interesting the fact that they are bringing this forward, because typically this was a Reconstruction era law that they're citing against this. And it has nothing to do with coming in and questioning the election, questioning the results, or a number of other things like that. What conspiracy against rights is the attempt with intent to prevent black people from getting to the polls. And I don't necessarily think that this actually applies here. So, a lot of really, really crazy stuff with that. I forgot, there was something that I was going to put on. And I don't think I wound up getting it on there. Where did I put that? That I didn't get it on the stack. That's where I put that. Yeah. One of the things we're going to look at while we're doing this today, while we're going through Contemporary today, is the fact that, and one of the lead charges with this was the attempt to change the slate of electors, put false electors in. And it's been brought up. I need to do some more research on the case in Hawaii, but it looks like there was an attempt for Hawaii to put in a false slate of electors in the 60s during Nixon's election. That's my weekend project. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. But in the meantime, while this was being brought up, somebody in Tim Pool's comment section reminded me of a video featuring Martin Sheen and Deborah Messing trying to convince electors to subvert the will of the people, which I'm told is a felony. Mogwai says, Trump's arraignment is sounding like a crazy Howard Dean speech. We're going to NYC, Tallahassee, and Atlanta to DC. Yeehaw! Alright, what are the allegations? The indictment brought by Jack Smith alleges a scheme orchestrated by Trump and 6 unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators, designed to overturn the election results despite losing to then-President-elect Joe Biden and knowing that there was no credible evidence of widespread fraud. Now, the widespread, that's going to be important because that's a weasel word into this. It's something that they have been inserting from the beginning, saying that Trump says that there had to have been a change in every election system all the way across the country. It's something that I pushed back on since they started saying widespread fraud. Whereas instead, what the court cases tried to push to was to have a look at several small, targeted, and questionable sites, election sites, in swing states. I don't think there was widespread fraud. In fact, I know there wasn't. But I think that there were a few elections that we needed to take a look at least. It also accuses Trump of seeking to exploit the chaos of January 6th riot at the Capitol in a bid to stop the certification of electoral votes. Which is weird, because the only thing that fits on is obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. And that's a stretch, by the way. That is a big, big, big stretch to put that with that. Especially given the fact that he didn't go to the Capitol. And then they go on and they give us a civics lesson on what happens in the criminal justice system. Was an arraignment? Wasn't Trump already arraigned in June, or was that April? They're trying to mock themselves and it's not working. Who's the judge? We talked about that yet. Will Trump enter a not guilty plea? Spoiler alert, yes. Will Trump appear in person? Spoiler alert, yes. Will Trump's court appearance be on camera? Spoiler alert, no. Has Trump ever had a virtual court appearance? The judge in Trump's New York case allowed him to appear by video for a May 23rd hearing in New York. Such a setup is extraordinarily rare. It's typically used for those who are hospitalized. In D.C. federal court, virtual appearances are more common and have been used for many of the defendants charged in other cases related to the January 6th Selfie Fest because they were coming from all across the country. So, with that, that is what we see from them. Of course, the Capitol security plan is in place for the Trump arraignment. That's an intimidation tactic, by the way. There was no danger from Trump supporters. From Andrew Solender. The chief of Capitol Police told reporters on Wednesday that law enforcement again plans to bolster security at the Capitol in preparation for former President Trump's arraignment. Trump's indictments and arrests have consistently sparked concerns about a potentially violent response from his supporters. This indictment in particular, which charges Trump for his actions in the lead up to the January 6th Selfie Fest on the Capitol, is resurfacing ugly memories. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about memories of what's possibly going to happen about this, forget about the January 6th Selfie Fest for a second and think about the Justice for January 6th rally in the following September that most of you would like the rest of us to forget because, now, we got memes like this one. Hang on. Yeah, we got memes like this out of that one. That was at the Justice for J6 rally, by the way. I suppose I could have done this a little bit better and actually open the image in a new tab like I always do, so we can stretch it out and see it a little bit more. Yeah, that was the January 6th, or Justice for J6 rally that they would like you to forget. Hey, is that a 45 in your pocket, or are you happy to see me? 6 gentlemen standing together with fresh fade haircuts and Ray-Bans. What he's saying, we're prepared for tomorrow. This is from yesterday, of course. Tom Manger said in a press conference. Though he said the fencing erected in the aftermath of January 6th will not be reinstalled, which is surprising because they're doing it in Georgia. I actually was surprised to not see the fencing in the little bit of photographs that I saw today. I thought that was a for sure one for me. Manger said there is a security plan in place, but declined to go into specifics. He said the Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies have been working together in preparation for whatever happens, adding, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, and we've had a couple phone calls today. So they're preparing for it. One that didn't come to pass from the Daily Wire, sheriff expects Trump to get mugshot if indicted in Georgia. Oh, that's for Georgia. Okay, we're actually going to move that down. We're going to put this one after this Blaze article here, which is weird because actually I had a comment to Don Winslow for that here. But before we get into any more of this, I wanted to share this with you guys, because one of the accusations with this
Electoral College, this
is the fact that they had the fake electors in place. And by the way, one of the other things with that is there are, what, now 20 people indicted, arraigned, and facing felony charges in Michigan for false slate of electors, for trying to subvert the will of the people. And in fact, if we go back to CBS, conspiracy against rights. If what we're seeing here in the federal court now falls under that category, which I'm not convinced that it does, then the video I'm about to show you also falls under that category. Now, question is, where the hell did I put it? So, let's watch this. And remind you that this is not the first time somebody has tried to intimidate, sway, or give a false set of electors. Let's listen.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications.
An eminent degree. Someone who is highly qualified for the job.
The Electoral College was created specifically to prevent an unfit candidate from becoming president.
There are 538 members of the Electoral College. You
and just 36 other conscientious Republican electors could make a difference.
By voting your conscience on December 19th.
And thereby shaping the future of our nation.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton.
As you know, the Constitution gives electors the right to vote for any eligible person.
Any eligible person, no matter which party they belong to.
But it should certainly be someone you consider especially competent.
Especially competent to serve as President of the United States of America.
By voting your conscience, you and other brave Republican electors can give the House of Representatives the option to select a qualified candidate for the presidency.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
I stand with you in support and solidarity with conservatives, independents, and liberals.
And all citizens of the United States.
The American people trust that your voice speaks for us all.
And that you will make yourself heard through the constitutional responsibility granted to you by Alexander Hamilton himself.
What is evident is that Donald Trump lacks more than the qualifications to be president.
He lacks the necessary stability.
And clearly the respect for the Constitution of our great nation.
You have position,
the authority, and the opportunity to go down in the books as an American hero
who changed the course of history.
And you have my respect.
You have my respect.
You have my respect.
For your patriotism
and service to the American people. Unite for America.
So, does that not fall under the umbrella of trying to subvert the will of the American people? Go ahead and blow the Electoral College vote, the official count. And, by the way, this would have affected what happened on January the 6th of 2017. I'm pretty sure that, given the precedent that's here, that makes this a felony. And because they didn't put a new law, it's just the interpretation of the law, that means that everybody who appeared in this video can be arrested for attempting to subvert the will of the American people. I know where you can find them. They're on the picket line. Well, they're probably not on the picket lines, but you can ask their staffers who are on the picket lines in Hollywood right now. So that is an interesting look at what has happened there. All right, now we're going to talk about what has happened. No, I'm going to talk about the mugshot first because I did put that up there. So Don Winslow pointing out the fact that why is Donald Trump not being required to have a mugshot taken like every other criminal defendant? That's why I thought the Georgia story was up with this one, because I actually thought that this meant that he was going to. Who negotiated that special treatment? I wish the press would cover that because millions of us would like to know why there's no mugshot in 3 separate indictments. To which I pointed out to Don Winslow, because he'd use it to fundraise and he'd be successful with it. You know, like you guys are trying to do. Dude, you know, if there was a mugshot, number one, the Trump team would have that thing on t-shirts with slogans, especially with the "arrested for you" line that he keeps going with over and over on with that. And that would be one of the top selling pieces of merchandise out there in MAGA world. You couldn't keep those things on the shelf at a Trump rally. And people like Don Winslow want to put it out there because they want to go sell mouse pads and t-shirts and everything that said, "We beat fascism! Look, we're putting him in jail." He just wants to grift off it, the same as everybody else. Trump has pled not guilty by the spoiler alert that was given a little bit ago. Let's throw some music back up here. Trump pleads not guilty to charges that he conspired to overturn the 2020 election. From Kyle Cheney and Betsy Woodruff Swan. Former President Trump pled not guilty on Thursday to federal charges accusing him of orchestrating a criminal conspiracy to try to derail the transfer of power after the 2020 election. No, that charge is actually not in here. That is a falsehood, Politico. With hundreds of eyes all fixed on him, including from several federal judges who lined the back of the wooden-paneled courtroom, Trump stood and declared himself not guilty of the sweeping 4-count case prosecutors have leveled against him. During the tense 27-minute proceeding, Trump was seated just 20 feet from Jack Smith, the man attempting to convict him in 2 federal persecutions that could result in lengthy prison sentences. For a moment, as they awaited the start of the arraignment, the two appeared to make eye contact. Though much of the proceeding was carefully scripted and choreographed, a significant point of tension immediately emerged. How soon will Trump stand trial? And it's going to be about the midst of campaign season. It's not going to be in the beginning of the primaries or the debates. It's going to be right about the time the Republican Party is choosing who they're going to be putting up by the primary votes. Thomas Wyndham, the prosecutor helming the trial team for Smith, said the case should move quickly. The case will benefit from normal order, including a speedy trial, Wyndham told the magistrate judge overseeing the arraignment. But John Lauro, an attorney for the former president, said Trump's legal team might need a long time to go through the evidence that prosecutors are required to hand over to the defense. These are weighty issues, he added. Obviously, the U.S. has had 3.5 years to investigate this matter, and also there's a number of agents and lawyers that are assisting the government in this proceeding. And all I'm going to ask, Your Honor, is the opportunity to fairly defend our client, but in order to do that, we're going to need a little time. Magistrate Judge Muxilla Upadhyaya replied, I can guarantee everybody that there will be a fair process and a fair trial in this case, honk honk. Wearing a dark blue suit and a red tie, Trump was processed as a criminal defendant in the federal courthouse in Washington before entering his not guilty plea. He is represented by Laurel, New York attorney Todd Blanche, who is defending Trump in several of the ongoing criminal cases. A third Trump lawyer, Evan Corcoran, was also in the courtroom on Thursday, but did not sit at the counsel's table with Trump and his other attorneys. Notably shortly before the proceedings began, several judges of the Federal District Court in Washington, including Chief Judge James Boasberg, who presided over the various grand jury disputes that played out in the secret in recent months, filed into the room. Alongside Boasberg were Judges Amy Berman Jackson, who has excoriated Trump in her sentencing remarks for some January 6 defendants, and Randy Moss. Retired Judge Thomas Hogan and Magistrate Judge Michael Harvey were also present in the gallery. Although Upadhyaya presided over the arraignment, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan has been assigned to the case and is expecting to handle it going forward. Chutkan's first hearing was set for August 28th. Before then, prosecutors and Trump's defense team were ordered to submit briefs. Proposing a schedule for the trial, Chutkan expects to set a trial date. At the August 28th hearing, Upadhyaya said, Trump criticized Chutkan in a social media post a few hours before he came to court on Thursday, calling her unfair. It's probably a fair assessment. Chutkan, appointee of President Obama, ruled against Trump in 2021 when she allowed the House January 6 Select Committee to access Trump's White House records. Much of the evidence in those records has now resurfaced in the new indictment. The arraignment took place at the E. Barrett Prettyman U.S. Courthouse, located across the street from the Capitol, where thousands of Trump supporters rioted 2.5 years ago in what prosecutors say was the culmination of his efforts to subvert the election. It was Trump's third arraignment since April, we know that. So, there we have it, not guilty. Let's go back and talk to Dershowitz again. Alan Dershowitz. Reporting from the Daily Wire's Daniel Chaitin, Dershowitz argues Trump's case doesn't satisfy the Banana Republic test, which I'd be interested in because, it seems like it to me. Special counsel Jack Smith's January 6 case against former President Trump fails to pass the Banana Republic test, according to Harvard Law School professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. During a discussion with Blaze Media co-founder Glenn Beck, Dershowitz argued the prosecutors will not be able to prove Trump acted with a corrupt motive as he allegedly sought to overturn the results of the 2020 election over claims that it was stolen. Still, the inquiry is escalating as Trump is campaigning the GOP frontrunner in the 2024 race for the White House, setting up a possible general election rematch with Sleepy Joe, Dershowitz noted. This just doesn't satisfy the Banana Republic test. In Banana Republics, presidents prosecute their political opponents, and the stronger their political opponents are in the polls, the more likely they are to be prosecuted, Dershowitz said. Well, let's have a listen.
Alan Dershowitz is with us. He is, of course, the author of Get Trump and the Price of Principle and host of The Dersh Show. Alan Dershowitz joins us now. We would love to understand, Alan, what exactly is Donald Trump being charged with in this latest indictment?
The basic charge is that he personally knew he had lost the election. He believed that he had actually lost the election fair and square, and he engaged in all these actions with a corrupt motive. I don't think the government's going to be able to prove that. There is no.
First of all, let me tell you something. I talked to Donald Trump probably about 2 weeks before January 6th. There is no way he believed he lost that election. There's still, today, he does not believe he lost that election. I can guarantee it. You know him well enough to know that.
He believes he won the election, and he believes it was stolen from him. I think he's wrong. Many people told him he was wrong. Many people are quoted in the indictment telling him he was wrong, but that doesn't make the crime. Crime requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he himself actually knew and believed it and acted with a corrupt motive. I don't think the government's going to be able to prove that. But to state a broader point, when the Attorney General of the United States authorizes an indictment, as was done here, against the man running against the incumbent president, who is now tied 44-44 in the New York Times poll, that indictment better be the strongest indictment in American history. There should be a smoking gun, fingerprints, a videotape, and a confession. This document is so flawed, is so filled with speculation. Jack Smith's famous for bringing speculative cases and then being smacked down by appellate courts. This just doesn't satisfy the Banana Republic test. In Banana Republics, presidents prosecute their political opponents. And the stronger their political opponents are in the polls, the more likely they are to be prosecuted. And we don't want that to happen in the United States. And I think this indictment doesn't meet what I call the Nixon standard. The Nixon standard is Nixon's crimes were so obvious that even his political supporters favored his being impeached or being prosecuted. That's not the case here. Right now, the only people who seem to support this indictment are partisans who are anti-Trump, and that's just not enough to heal the divisions in this country. So this indictment will further the divisions.
Yeah, but divided people are easier to control. That's one of the other things that I've been bringing up from the beginning of this. And just from the beginning of the division that I started to notice under the Obama admin, that's where I first started to notice that they were pushing us against each other, almost into a class warfare situation. And this goes in both directions, too. Republicans, I am not going to give you the benefit of the doubt on this one. You have made rhetoric saying that you want more unity off of this, but my God, if you see what's happening with the Trump versus DeSantis people, the division is strong just within your own party. How do you expect to unite an entire country when you can't unite with people that you need desperately to win an election? But a divided people are easier to control, especially when you can come back and propagandize that, hey, look at this evil person that wants to get into politics and all of his evil followers. I will protect you from them. That's the basis, by the way, of the Biden campaign for 2024. I can't believe that he hates Trump as much as he does because he completely plagiarized that from the Trump campaign of 2020. But it's all going to come down to the intent side of things. Let's see, what else do we have here? We've got speeches of this. So I've got a clip from Disclose, and then we've got a clip from CNN of Trump talking after the arraignment here. So let's have a listen. We won't pop the music back up. 1 minute clip here from Disclose.tv. Now, Trump says, "This is a very sad day for America," after pleading not guilty on all January 6 charges. Let's listen.
Donald Trump is out of his car and is about to speak at the airport.
Very sad day for America, and it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
So, Sky News with that. CNN. Hear what Trump said after leaving the courthouse. I don't know if this is going to be the same clip or not. It looks like the same clip, actually.
Thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America.
No, that is the same. There's only 47-second clip there, so they actually had a little bit more on the disclose.tv. What have I said since we started talking about this? Since we started talking about arraignment and indictment and everything else. If Joe Biden was serious and he wanted to appear strong, he would come back out, he'd get up on the stage, he'd go into the little Oval Office, the fake Oval Office that they built in the office building. Or maybe they'd let him do it in the real Oval Office for once. But he'd get up on that stage, get up at that podium and say, "Hey man, I'm strong. Look at me. I was the one that took Corn Pop behind the shed with a chain around my fist and taught him a lesson because he was a real bad dude, man. They're going to using law enforcement against my political enemy. That makes me look weak, man. I'm telling you. So I hereby issue, and I already signed it, an official pardon against Donald Trump for all of his federal crimes, and I urge Kathy Hochul and Brian Kemp to do the same thing, man. You know why? Because I can beat him fair and square. I don't need to put him in prison for that. I'm going to show you again that I can beat him at his strongest, man. Come on. Who's with me? As I said before, I guarantee that is an extra 10 points in the polls for Biden if he does that. And he does look weak. Is this the clip that I wanted? No, I do. Yeah, I do want this one. An interesting side note that came up with this one. I thought I wanted the lawyer clip, but I want that one down towards the bottom of the topic. Interesting comment. Al Sharpton, noted race baiter Al Sharpton, poses the question, can you imagine if James Madison or Thomas Jefferson tried to overthrow the government? Let's listen.
One day, our children's children will read American history. And can you imagine our reading that James Madison or Thomas Jefferson tried to overthrow the government so they could stay in power? That's what we're looking at. We're looking at American history.
Who's going to tell him? Anybody? Somebody want to tell him? James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, along with George Washington. All three of them who signed the Declaration of Independence. They literally overthrew the government. That's what we remember them in history for, as the Founding Fathers. You mook. All right, some of the background for this here. Subdued crowd gathers outside Washington courthouse where Trump was arraigned. From Andrew Zhang. Donald Trump arrived with little fanfare on Thursday to be arraigned for federal charges of attempting to overturn the 2020 election. As a few hundred people with little apparent partisan juice lined the streets waiting for his arrival outside the E. Barrett Prettyman U.S. Courthouse in D.C. A small handful of local supporters and protesters were also on hand. While the crowd slowly grew throughout the day, mostly thanks to curious onlookers passing through, as of about 1700 hours, only around a dozen supporters of the former president were outside the courthouse brandishing Trump 2024 flags, calling for the release of the January 6 political prisoners, and wearing red hats on the street. A few cars passed by, carrying the same banners for support. The large majority of onlookers seemingly had no idea that Trump had arrived shortly after 3 or had left after he was arraigned, and they did not express any support or opposition. Well, I'm sure that they were sitting there in their crisp, brand new MAGA hats with their Trump 2024 flags, with the folds still in them, although I think that the people that are doing these kinds of things have figured out what an iron is at this point. But we'll just say with the folds still in them, waiting, saying, "Hey, Special Agent Jones, do you have any more supporters coming to your side yet?" No, I just talked to Special Agent Zapka, and he doesn't have anybody coming out there either. He's just surrounded by Brown and Eddington. Yeah, no, there's nobody coming here either. There were about a dozen celebratory counter-protesters as well, playing music and holding signs that read "Lock him up," while others mocked the former president while dressed in their best Trump garb. They also had a mini rock concert later in the afternoon. One of Trump's supporters told Politico he was not surprised about the low turnout, citing what he perceived as persecution of Trump's base. Yeah, nobody wants to sit in front of Tanya Chutkan. And they know that as they sit out there and tensions run high, it only takes a few people at the front of the crowd to say, "Hey, we've got to go inside the Capitol. We promise nothing will happen. I promise I'll be right behind you when you do." Yeah, Jones, I need an exit. They have scared Americans, namely Trump supporters, shitless, said Dion Cini, 54 of New York City, who held the Trump 2024 flag in his hands, and said that he traveled the country to support the former president for years. All the Republicans are just scared right now, and rightly so. "I want freedom," said Michael Simonet, a leader for the Blackstroke Trump movement, who was flanked by 5 other. Trumps represents freedom. Outside the courthouse, the largest presence by far was the group that Trump has continued to attack as one of his biggest enemies, the press, whose crews and cameras from all different outlets and languages lined by the hundreds around the building. Journalists had begun lining up on Wednesday to cover the historic moment, and a lot of them just wanted to be there when the first brick got thrown. The scene was vastly different from 939 days ago, when thousands of the former president's supporters had been told that they'd be fine if they went into the Capitol because it's the people's house and were allowed in by police officers. I am not going to use that word, no matter how Politico puts it in. I watched the Stephen Ignoramus video. I saw what happened. Visible from the courthouse, Thursday so far was a divergence from the circus-like atmospheres outside of Trump's earlier arraignments in New York City in April and Miami in June, when hundreds from his base flooded the cities, which was, again, a stupid idea. That is a stupid idea. And by the way, 939 days ago, I told several people that I know, don't go there, that is a stupid idea. Again, I thought most of them, I thought it was going to be more of a fish in the barrel kind of situation. We have video of a reporter describing how Trump acted in the courtroom during the arraignment. You can decide whether or not you buy it or not. This is CNN's Paula Reed and Evan Perez. I've not pre-listened to this video. I don't know if they're going to tell you what happened, if it's going to be propaganda, or what's going to happen with this. I'm interested in this video, by the way, but that's going to be an off-screen thing for me. I'm going to listen to that a little bit later. But let's listen to this one here.
An extraordinary moment, Anderson. The former president was asked to stand and enter his own plea to the charges that have been filed against him. And I'm told he didn't even use the microphone. He just looked straight at the judge and projected his voice and entered a plea of not guilty. Now, again, at the hearing down in Florida, when he went through this in a federal courtroom down there, he had his lawyer enter that plea. So to hear him say that in his own voice is significant. Now the judge is reading the conditions of his release. You may remember that down in Florida, this is actually what delayed the hearing. But here she's saying that you must not violate state or federal law, and also that he cannot communicate with anyone known to be a witness about the case unless through a lawyer. Now that could get tricky because, as we know, he's listed with 6 co-conspirators, many of whom are still close associates. So much like in the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the fact that so many people in his inner circle are caught up in this, that will likely be a difficult issue to navigate.
Maybe it's the fact that this is his 3rd time going through an arraignment. But his body language was, absolutely a lot different. I mean, he sat there with his hands clasped. He appeared displeased about something. There was something that the pretrial services official who was in the courtroom handed papers to his attorneys, to the Justice Department attorneys there, Tom Windham and John Lauro on Mr. Trump's side. And then they began discussing whatever it is in perhaps the bail package. That's typically the paperwork that he is handed, and then he is signing it. There was something in that paperwork that appeared to displease the former president because he had a couple of seemed to be heated conversations with Todd Blanche, who was seated to his right. The former president mostly looked straight ahead. He looked around the room. There were a few times where he and he and Jack Smith looked at each other. It was absolutely more Jack Smith looking in his direction, but the former president, because of the vantage point, absolutely saw Jack Smith. There was also, it's a lot different from the one in Miami, from the hearing in Miami, where they didn't see each other during the entire hearing. One of the things that I think was interesting was the former president, you heard him just a few times. He said, yes, I do, when the judge asked him if he understood the charges, if he understood his right to remain silent. And of course, when he said, when he pleaded not guilty, he didn't speak directly into the microphone. He spoke directly ahead. The demeanor of the former president, it reminded me a lot of, during the presidential debates with Hillary Clinton, when candidate Clinton said something to get under his skin. That's the look he had on his face quite a few times as he sat there with his attorneys having some discussions, as he waited about 20 minutes for the judge to take her seat in the courtroom.
Chris?
All right, so definitely coming in with an air of defiance, which, by the way, flies in the face of what the Page Shills are saying. I heard that Jack Smith stared him down the whole time. He must be shitting his pants right now, because they've got a scat fetish. I don't think he is. All right, a little bit more on the protest side. From ABC News, protesters faced off outside federal courthouse as Trump arraigned from Tia Humphreys, Catherine Faulders, Laura Romero, Sue Rin Kim, and Sarah Beth Hensley. Police and protesters for and against Trump faced off outside the federal courthouse in D.C., where the former president was arraigned on Thursday afternoon. More than 100 protesters gathered outside the courthouse before Trump's 4 p.m. arraignment. They were joined by a large police presence patrolling the area. A handful of Trump supporters carried large campaign flags that said Trump for President 24 and finished the wall. Another held a sign that said Trump won. At one point, a fake presidential limousine drove near the courthouse with a passenger inside wearing a Trump mask. Around the time of his arrival, a man dressed as a revolutionary soldier sang the national anthem on a microphone. Trump supporters joined him in singing. Anti-Trump protesters showed up as well, one of whom wore a black and white striped jail uniform. Another protester screamed expletives in a megaphone. Classy. Some of them got into arguments and dispersed after a while. There were no physical altercations. Meanwhile, curious tourists passed by, taking photos and videos of the media and the protesters. All in all, a calm day. I bet you one of the special agents was sitting out there, listening to his earpiece, popping in there, going into his wrist piece. Hey, do you think there are enough people out here to bring the fake gallows we made out? No, not enough people? Alright, some of the reaction to this. And then we'll move on from that. Bill Barr, exclusive. Barr obliterates Trump's defense. He knew well that he had lost the election. From Kanita Iyer over at CNN. Former AG Bill Barr on Wednesday undermined a key pillar of his old boss's defense in the special counsel's probe into the 2020 election interference, telling CNN's Caitlin Collins that Trump knew well that he lost the election. I had to check the date on this because when we were talking probe, I mean, we have the indictment already. Oh, got to refresh Rumble. That's frozen up. Either that or I'm off. The former AG also described Trump's alleged actions as detailed in the indictment as nauseating and despicable, saying on the source, someone who engaged in that kind of bullying about a process that is fundamental to our system and to our own self-government shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office. A central premise of the special counsel's case is that Trump knew the election claims he was making were false. After being told by several close aides that he had lost the election, Trump's lawyers have argued that his statements were protected under the First Amendment, a position that Barr, in his first interview since Trump's third indictment, said was not a valid argument. As the indictment says, that they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can tell the people the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. At first I wasn't sure, but I've come to believe that he, knew that he lost the election. Okay, Bill, prove it. And that's going to be the burden of proof for everybody who's doing this, is give us proof. Because I don't think that you have it. I don't think it exists with a person who is that egotistical to convince himself that he lost the will of the American people. Yeah, I don't think it's there. This is Trump's attorney, Haba. I think that everyone was made aware that he lost the election, but that doesn't mean that was the only advice that he was given, which possibly would go counter to what Mr. Barr had to say.
There's testimony and there's a number of aides that have said that the president was made aware that he lost the election and yet continued to argue that it was stolen from him. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I think that everybody was made aware that he lost the election, but that doesn't mean that that was the only advice he was given. As anybody understands what happens in the Oval Office, there are a numerous amount of advisors and politicians and lawyers, not just one or two, that are giving you advice and telling you what they believe is true. So he may not agree with Mike Pence, he may not agree with one of his lawyers, but that doesn't mean that there weren't other people advising him exactly the opposite. And the president has a right, as every one of us do, to listen to several opinions and make their decision.
There's testimony and there's a number of aides that have said that the president was made aware that...
Yeah, that kind of shoots in the foot what Barr just said. Trump lawyer says Jack Smith is endangering the American legal system with latest indictment from Leif LeMahieu. A lawyer representing former President Trump told Daily Wire editor emeritus Ben Shapiro that the DOJ special investigator was putting the American justice system in jeopardy after he brought another indictment against Trump. Didn't we read this yesterday? Why was this back at the top of the Daily Wire? I read this one yesterday. We're skipping that one. Alright, and one of the last pieces here before we move on, we're going to talk about some of the other... We're still going to be talking about January 6th, but other things with that. One of the paid shills extraordinary, Mr. Chris Morey. This is hilarious. The U.S. lost its AAA credit rating because Republicans raided the Capitol and held up the debt ceiling negotiations. No, the U.S. lost its AAA credit rating because we're $32 trillion in debt and we're trying to print our way back out of it. And half of our country is fucking sick of it. You know, it doesn't give people confidence in the U.S. government when the former president's trying to overthrow elections via insurrection. Well, do you think that's why they waited 3 years to downgrade it? And people want the guy going to federal prison to run this country in 2024. Yeah, that has absolutely nothing to do with this. I'm a little surprised this one didn't get deleted. I thought for sure I was going to come up to this one and say, oh, sorry, this post has been deleted. Because this is an abject falsehood. All right. NBC News, January 6th writer, who Tucker Carlson guest said was a Fed, is arrested by the FBI. A Trump fan who participated in the January 6th Selfie Fest and then was the subject of a conspiracy theory on Tucker's former Fox News show was arrested by the FBI on Wednesday. Rally runner, formerly known as Daniel Donnelly Jr., was arrested in St. Louis, according to court records. Runner faces 5 federal charges, including obstructing, impeding, and interfering with law enforcement officers during a civil disorder. Back in 2021, Joe McBride, a lawyer who was then representing several January 6 defendants, said on Carlson's show that Runner was clearly a law enforcement officer and an agent provocateur who had only dressed up as a Trump fan as part of a scheme to make Trump fans look bad. In fact, Runner was a real Trump fan, as well as a St. Louis Cardinals fanatic who ran around the stadium during home games. Thus his name changed. He was also a big admirer of Tucker Carlson, and said in an interview last year that he was disappointed that Carlson would spread false information. Didn't they say the same thing about Epps, though, too? But he's been arrested. It's probably the last you're going to hear about him. I'm a little pissed off. Former Capitol Police Chief tells Tucker Carlson in leaked Fox News interview that January 6 events were a cover-up from Joe McKinnon. So this would be interesting. Former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund told Tucker Carlson in a controversial interview that everything appears to be a cover-up as it pertains to the January 6 protests at the U.S. Capitol. Although Fox kept that interview under wraps, the National Pulse has begun releasing segments wherein Sund provides critical insights into the event that has been used to great effect by Democrats and other forces antipathetic to the former president. When speaking to Russell Brand in early July, Carlson said that he had initially taken an interest in the January 6 protests due to all the lying about it. Kind of wish they'd release video of this one, honestly. So the more time has passed, and it becomes really obvious that core claims made about January 6 were lies, said Carlson. The amount of lying around January 6, and it was obvious in the tapes that I showed, is really distressing. Prior to his ouster at Fox, Carlson had aired previously unreleased footage of the protests that appeared to contradict the narrative that had been carefully constructed by the media and the January 6 Selfie Fest Unselect Committee. When speaking to Brand, Carlson referenced an eye-opening interview he had conducted with Sund while still at Fox News, saying, "I never thought it was a false flag or anything like that. I'm not a conspiracist by temperament. I never thought that. And then I interviewed the chief of the Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, in an interview that has never been aired on Fox, by the way. I was fired before it could air. Sund, a police officer for over 30 years, had been the head of the U.S. Capitol Police from 2019 through the protests, but resigned on January 7th. Amid claims by then House Speaker Pelosi and others that there was a failure of leadership at the top. In February 2021, Sund penned a letter to Pelosi and other congressional leaders noting, "Perfect hindsight does not change the fact that nothing in our collective experience or our intelligence, including intelligence provided by the FBI, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, DC Metro Police, indicated that a well-coordinated armed assault on the Capitol might occur on January 6th, except, of course, without being armed." Sund further noted that during a meeting with dozens of top law enforcement and military officials from DC, including the FBI, Secret Service, and National Guard, no entity provided any intelligence indicating that there would be a coordinated attack on the Capitol. The entire intelligence community seems to have missed this, he wrote. Sund also intimated the Capitol Police had been set up to fail. Sund told WTTG-TV that he had asked the House and Senate security officials for their permission to bring the National Guard days ahead of the protests, but he was denied. He also indicated that he had asked for the National Guard several more times during the protests, but was repeatedly denied until their ultimate arrival at 5:40 p.m. on January 6th. Around 19 minutes into the Tucker Carlson Tonight interview, which is being released by the National Pulse piecemeal, Sund says that people were reporting the intelligence correctly. "If I was allowed to do my job as the chief, we wouldn't be here. This didn't have to happen," stressing, "I'm a little pissed off." "Everything appears to be a cover-up," he continued. "Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at the information and intelligence they had, the military had, it's all watered down. I'm not getting intelligence. I'm denied any support from the National Guard in advance. I'm denied National Guard when we're under attack for 71 minutes. Look, you described this as a failure to get intelligence to people who needed it. But it sounds like they were hiding the intelligence?" "That's what I'm getting at," said Sund. "Could there possibly be the kind of wanted something to happen? It's not a far stretch to begin to think that, It's sad when you start putting everything together and thinking about the way this played out. What was their end goal? You look at what's happening. Was that their end goal?" So, if the National Pulse puts out a video, that is going to wind up on the stack. Of course, as usual, there's going to need to be proof to go along with these statements, documentation, etc. I'm guessing that if this is true, and I do believe that it's true, but if this is true, then a lot of that documentation is not going to exist anymore. But it's an interesting thought point, at least with us not being able to know for beyond a reasonable doubt if it's true. It's an interesting thought exercise in the very least. Alright, now the Georgia one, and then we'll talk about Devon Archer. From the Daily Wire, sheriff expects Trump to get mugshot if indicted in Georgia. And that is going to be on t-shirts, by the way, if he does. From Daniel Chayton. Georgia's Fulton County Sheriff said he anticipates Trump will get a mugshot if the former president is indicted on a 2020 election investigation in the state. "Unless someone tells me differently, we are following our normal practices, and so it doesn't matter your status. We'll have a mugshot ready for you," said Sheriff Pat Labatt, according to a local ABC affiliate, WSB-TV. If the prediction holds true, it could mean that Trump would get photographed during booking for the first time across multiple indictments on the state and federal levels. And then he's going to get a hold of that, and he's going to slap it on t-shirts. Good luck. Enjoy. I've got this feeling that some of the handlers that are up at the top of this are going to tell the sheriff otherwise at this point, because he said unless he's told otherwise. I've got this feeling before this happens, he's going to be told otherwise, because just like I said, You know, if he does this, if you do this, he's just going to put it on t-shirts, right? All right, now we got to move on and talk about Devon Archer. But the last thing I'm going to say on this whole thing, I will be, and I have been accused of being a rabid Trump supporter because of this. I am not. I wouldn't vote for him a third time. I watched the spending spree, and it took me until like 14 days before Election Day in 2020 to say that I was even going to vote for someone for president. Because everybody blew. There was no way in hell I was voting for Jorgensen. Biden, that's not going to happen. And the Donald, I saw a lot of promises getting broken towards the end based on ego, plus the culture war, plus everything else. I couldn't do it. At the very end, I did. I held my nose for it. I hate myself for it. But I'm going to tell you right off the bat. You don't have to be a supporter of a person, of a candidate, of a political party to understand the implications of using your Department of Justice to go after a political enemy. I've been very consistent about this. Lock her up? No, don't lock her up, because what judge is going to take the case? What judge is going to be impartial enough to take the case? Hunter Biden needs to go to prison for the rest of his life. Okay, what judge are you going to put him in front of that's going to satisfy everybody in this country? I have been very consistent about this. And there are a few presidents where, given the chance, I would put them in prison for life. W comes to mind. W absolutely comes to mind. That is a war criminal that needs to go to The Hague. But as far as in this country, what judge are you going to throw him in front of? That's going to be objective enough to take the case that half the country is going to accept the results from. You don't have to be a supporter of a political party to understand that throwing a former president in the gulag leads to dangerous places. Let's talk Devon Archer. Because, by the way, the Republicans are going to continue to go down this failed road as well. 5 takeaways from Devon Archer's interview with House Oversight from Alex Gangitano and Michael Schnell. The House Oversight Committee on Thursday released the transcript of Archer's closed-door testimony. Full disclosure, have not read yet. Offering insight into the business dealings of his former business associate Hunter Biden and an eye into the GOP investigation of the Biden family. Archer sat for a transcribed interview before a House Oversight panel on Monday, after which the lawmakers on each side of the aisle offered conflicting interpretations of his testimony as observers awaited the release of the transcript. The clashing narratives continued on Thursday, with the Republicans on the committee saying that testimony from Archer, who they view as a key witness in their probe, confirmed several critical pieces of information in our investigation of the Biden's influence peddling schemes, while the top Democrat on the panel said the interview failed to produce any evidence of wrongdoing by the president. According to the transcript, Archer testified Hunter put his father, then vice president, on speakerphone during some of the meetings with associates, and the interview covered Biden's brand at length. But Archer said he was not aware of President Biden committing any wrongdoing. Abby Lowell, counsel for Hunter, said in a statement this week that House Republicans keep swinging and striking out on their pursuit of President Biden through his son. The release of the testimony was nonetheless a notable development in the House GOP's probe, which for months has sought to connect President Biden to his son's business dealings, especially as Republicans eye an impeachment inquiry targeting the White House. Here are your takeaways. Number 1, Archer said he's not aware of wrongdoings by President Biden. Archer said he had no knowledge of whether Biden altered any U.S. foreign policy while he was vice president to benefit his son. When flat out asked if he was aware of any wrongdoing, Archer said, "No, I'm not aware of any." Archer said he's not aware of bribes to Biden, which tells me he probably didn't get anything off the top of that one. Archer describes frequent calls between the Bidens. Archer recalled maybe 20 times that Hunter made it apparent to investors or other business contacts that he spoke to his dad, and said he had occasionally placed his father on speakerphone. Archer describes the Biden brand. Archer said the Biden family's brand provided value to Burisma. At one point in his testimony, he said he did not consider the brand to be Joe directly, but noted that the then vice president brought the most value to the brand. Archer later said he thought Burisma would have gone out of business if it didn't have the brand attached to it. But that's different than Biden's action, Goldman pressed him. Right, Archer responded. He said that he thinks having Hunter on the board is why Burisma was able to survive for as long as it did, just because of the brand. Archer talks about 2 Cafe Milano dinners. Archer spoke to the committee about 2 dinners that the then Vice President Joe attended at Cafe Milano in D.C., one in 2014 and one in 2015, both during Obama admin. After the 2014 dinner, he recalled a wire transfer of $142,300 from the Kenny's Rekeshev, a Kazakh businessman, to the Rosemont Seneca Bohai account for an expensive car for Hunter. Rosemont Seneca Bohai LLC was the private equity firm controlled by Archer at the time. The 2015 dinner centered on the World Food Program, and then Vice President Biden made an appearance at it. Archer described it as just a regular dinner, where there was a table of conversation, and denied that Hunter or business associates talked about business at the dinner. So, a few things going on with that. I don't want to pass judgment on this until I've read the transcript. There have been some things that have been put out about this already. The New York Post going the completely other direction in this. Joe Biden's deep involvement in Hunter's business with Chinese, Russians, and Ukrainians revealed in Devin Archer's full damning testimony. So the Hill is pretty much saying nothing to see here. The New York Post is saying this is the smoking gun. I'm willing to bet that somewhere in the middle is where the truth lies. From Stephen Nelson. First son Hunter's former business partner Devon Archer told lawmakers this week that Ukrainian natural gas firm Burisma Holdings brought the political scion onto its board so that people would be intimidated to mess with him illegally. Archer also revealed that then Vice President Biden met twice with his son's shady post-Soviet business partners at DC's Cafe Milano, not once as previously reported, according to the full transcript of a 4-hour deposition released Thursday by the House Oversight Committee. These and other revelations blew new holes into President Biden's claim that he never discussed business with his now 53-year-old son, as House Republicans move closer to launching an impeachment inquiry. Archer extensively discussed the value Hunter brought to Burisma as part of the Biden family brand, and said that he demonstrated to his clients at least 20 times, his ability to put his dad, the second highest U.S. official, on speakerphone. Under questioning from Democratic lawyers, Archer mused that I think Burisma would have gone out of business if it didn't have the brand attached to it. Well, the capabilities to navigate DC, they were able to, basically be in the news cycle. And I think that preserved them from a, longevity standpoint, Archer added. So, the New York Post does have the full deposition here. It is 4 hours. It is quite lengthy, by the way, 141 pages. Again, have not read this one yet. In fact, I'm just seeing this script for the first time. So, as I always do, we'll take this, drop this in the live chat for both the current and the future viewers, because there should be a live chat replay everywhere we go. And also into the Discord we go. Drop that in general chat if you guys want to read this New York Post article that has the PDF of the transcript there. Again, Hill telling us that's absolutely nothing. New York Post saying it's a smoking gun. It's over. They've got him this time. I'm guessing it's somewhere in the middle. This one here, Amuse, says, what the fuck? Devon Archer met with Zlochevsky in Moscow on the very day that Putin invaded Crimea, which is an interesting timing. A month later, Archer had a meeting with Biden at the West Wing of the White House, scheduled with just 1 day's notice. The meeting was ostensibly arranged under the pretense of a school project for his son. At the time, Devon was already serving on the board, and Hunter would join the board of Zlochevsky's company just days later. Subsequently, Joe Biden, who was in charge of Ukraine for the U.S., flew to Ukraine a few days later after his meeting with Devon Archer, promising resources and expertise for fracking. Which, by the way, why did Obama have a Ukraine czar, given the fact that up until that day, unless there was like massive intelligence that we didn't know, there was no indication of any problem with Ukraine? As has been pointed out by several commentators, most people who are screaming the loudest about Ukraine right now couldn't find Ukraine on the map before Putin invaded, which would go all the way again back into the 2014 invasion under Obama. For those unfamiliar with the background, Burisma was a company filled with Russian loyalists. Their former CEO, Leonid Petukov, now works with Putin. Zlochevsky was part of the former pre-Maidan government, which has strong ties to Russia. How does this align with Biden's stance on Ukraine? Burisma was the only domestic energy company with fracking leases in Crimea, and it had the Russian connections necessary to continue extracting resources. Biden had the U.S. connections to offer financial support and expertise for one specific type of extraction in Ukraine, unconventional or fracking. Imagine if Trump Jr. had met with a contact in Moscow on the day of Putin's Crimea invasion, and then proceeded to profit from oil extraction using his father as a go-between for resources. That would exclusively benefit his particular company. If you thought Crossfire Hurricane investigation was troubling, this situation raises even more serious questions. With a part of the transcript here screen grabbed, but that was kind of the first I'd heard of Burisma, Zlochevsky, the individual, and that he would be a potential investor. And then I was reintroduced. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But we were doing a large deal with an Eastern European bank to basically invest in and be like an anchor between the debt side for Rosemont Realty, for Rosemont Real Estate Acquisition Fund 2, and that meeting happened to be in March. It was March 4th, 2014, which was in Moscow, which was also the day that Putin invaded Crimea. So that deal fell through, as you can imagine. So that started the entire process. He was in Moscow. We were like, okay, well, we've got to get back on the fundraising trip, and I met with him. And that was basically met with him. That was like a follow-up meeting, pitching him, and that was the relationship. We asked him, or it was just a meeting. So, interesting stuff, by the way. A reporter pushing back on a top Democrat, by the way. Reporter calls out Rep. Dan Goldman over Archer testimony claim from Daniel Chayton. With the video. A House Democrat got called out by a reporter, which that in and of itself is a miracle. Over his characterization of a closed-door testimony by Devon Archer, a former business associate of Hunter, now that the transcript has been released. Dan Goldman, D. New York, told journalists that Archer informed lawmakers on Monday that Hunter sought to give the illusion of access to his father, then Vice President Biden, to get undue credit for things. This led to multiple news outlets publishing headlines that trumpeted that phrase. Catherine Herridge brought up Goldman's version of events when reporting on the release of Archer's lightly redacted transcript on Thursday. Let's listen.
Well, earlier this week, we just had to rely on the characterization from Republicans and Democrats about Devon Archer's testimony, but now we can see the full transcript. You'll recall that Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman said that Archer testified that it was the illusion of access to Joe Biden that Hunter Biden was offering to these clients. But in fact, when you look at the transcript, what you see is that that phrase, illusion of access, is in Dan Goldman's question. It's actually not what Devon Archer testified to. He says, yes, but that's not quite fair. This was about showing that there was the signal that there's influence and access here.
Yeah, and as also has been pointed out, I mean, nobody's going to pay for illusion of access. They're going to pay for access in the sums that we're seeing in this. So, a lot of questions about this, but we got to keep going. Let's talk about Niger, which has been an interesting thing going on in the background while the entire world focuses on the Donald. From the Associated Press. International pressure mounts on leaders of coup in Niger. Hundreds rally in support of junta. From Sam Mednick. International pressure mounted on Thursday on leaders of the coup in Niger, as the American Secretary of State said the U.S. stands very much in support of West African leaders who have threatened to use force to restore the nation's democracy, and Senegal offered troops to help. As hundreds of anti-French protesters rallied in the Nigerian capital in support of the ruling junta, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken offered general support for the regional bloc known as ECOWAS. Though he did not specifically refer to its threat of military action, Blinken told reporters in New York that the U.S. believes the bloc's efforts to reinstate toppled President Mohamed Bazoum are important, strong, and have our support. Senegal's Foreign Affairs Minister said that her country would participate in a military intervention if ECOWAS decides to take action. Senegalese soldiers have to go. These coups d'etat must be stopped, said Asita Talsal. Meanwhile, Niger's military leaders sought to exploit anti-Western sentiments to shore up their takeover. The junta suspended broadcaster RFI and France 24 television from broadcasting in the country, according to the French Foreign Affairs Ministry. These suspensions were part of the junta's authoritarian repression, the ministry wrote on X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. Last week's coup toppled Bazoum, whose ascendancy marked Niger's first peaceful democratic transfer of power since the independence from France in 1960. The coup stirred the strident anti-French sentiment and raised questions about the future of the fight against extremism in Africa's Sahel region, where Russia and Western countries have vied for influence. The coup has been condemned by Western countries and the ECOWAS bloc, which has threatened to forcibly remove the junta if it does not hand back power to Bazoum. As tensions have grown in the capital of Niamey in the region, many European countries have moved to evacuate citizens, including our country, by the way. Let's get the map! So, we are in a position that is, by the way, mostly in the Sahara Desert. So there's not a lot of this country that is populous. There are a few population centers across the Saharan region, and only one real major roadway going through. Looks like a bunch of smaller things that are marked on the map, but as far as what's named, I don't see anything like that. And then, of course, the capital and a lot of the population center bordering more lush and more capable of supporting life Nigeria, with a little bit of a border with Benin and Burkina Faso. So there are a couple things that are going on, and a couple things that we can look at and see here right away. Number one, the big one, is that this is a landlocked country. So if the West, who has alliances in Chad and Libya and Algeria and Mali, want to make sure that Niger plays ball, they can blockade this whole region without setting foot in Niger. Whether Burkina Faso, Benin, and Ghana get on board, that's questionable, because I don't know where they stand with the West, but these are all major Western aligned countries. right here. So that's one thing to keep in mind as this goes, and as we see what's happening with that. But the military coup leaders are going to struggle to hold on and take hold. I mean, my first question here is, hey, you remember that glorious 4 years where we didn't have to worry about any of this? Where none of this happened? I remember because I'm older than 3 years old. By the way, where is Senegal? That's the other one I wanted to grab here because they were offering troops up here. Yeah. Senegal, who is also a major Western aligned power, looking to come in and get involved in this. And that weird country of Gambia that just kind of sits in the middle of Senegal. It's like a hallway. Thursday's protests, organized by the junta and civil society groups on Niger's Independence Day. Protesters pumped their fists in the air and chanted support for neighboring countries that have also seen military takeovers in recent years. Some waved Russian flags, and one man brandished a Russian and Nigerian flag sewn together. So, they're also saying Nigerian, which typically when you got the emails from the Nigerian prince, it was Nigerian AN at the end. So I think the only difference is, I guarantee the pronunciation is the same, is that it's EN instead of AN, is the demonym. I was curious about that, by the way. For more than 13 years, the Nigerian people have suffered injustices. Protester Mokhtar Abdu Isa said, "The junta will get us out of this, God willing. They will free the Nigerian people. We're sick of the French," he added. Is this guy in Monty Python? It remains unclear whether a majority of the population supports the coup, and in many parts of the capital, people went on about their lives on Thursday as normal. U.S. President Biden used the occasion of Niger's Independence Day to call for Bazoum to be released and democracy restored. Yeah, again, you can barely hold your country together, Mr. Biden. What do you plan to do about this? Hey, look, man, the Nigerian people have the right to choose their leaders, man, and they express their will through free and fair elections, and that must be respected," said the statement. John Kirby said the admin is still focused on diplomacy, so a lot of things happening, a lot of things moving here, in a country that a lot of people don't really pay a lot of mind to because, again, the vast majority of it's sitting in the middle of the desert. It's pretty sparsely populated over there. CNN, a Niger coup leader, meets with the Wagner-allied junta in Mali. From Larry Madowo, Jesse Gretiner, and Tara John. General Salifu Modi, one of the Niger officers who seized power in the military coup last week, visited Mali on Wednesday, according to the Mali presidency, amid speculation of a possible interest in the Wagner mercenary group, which has a presence in the country. We'll remember the Wagner Group is the group that is doing a lot of the contracted fighting in the Ukraine, although most of their Russian members have now been reabsorbed into the Russian military. But they didn't stop being a thing after that, "Whoa, it's so cool," that happened in Russia a few weeks ago. Mali's transitional president, Assimi Goïta, hosted Modi and a large Nigerian military delegation on Wednesday, according to the pictures in a statement posted on Facebook by the Mali presidency. Modi called the meeting part of a complex regional context. The Mali presidency said and thanked Malian authorities for their support and their accompaniment since the seizure of power by the CNSP, referring to the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, where Modi is vice president. Hundreds of Wagner contractors are stationed in Mali at the invitation of the country's military junta to quell an Islamist insurgency brewing in the area where the borders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger meet. Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin last week celebrated the coup in the landlocked West African country, saying his private military company could also help with situations like the one unfolding in Niger. The dramatic ouster of Niger's president Bazoum last week alarmed Western leaders, including the US and France, which are both key stakeholders of Niger's crackdown on local Islamist insurgencies. US officials have warned the Russian mercenary group could now seek new opportunities in Niger. I would not be surprised to see Wagner attempt to exploit the situation to their own advantage, as they've attempted to exploit other situations in Africa to their own advantage, State Department spokesman Matt Miller said on Wednesday. Miller added that any attempt by military leaders in Niger to bring Wagner forces into Niger would be a sign, yet another sign, that they do not have the best interests of the Nigerian people. The coup has provoked a split reaction from countries in the Sahel region, where the threat of militant extremism in recent years have destabilized local governments that led to volatility. On Monday, Mali and Burkina Faso's governments said they would consider any military intervention an act of war against them and put their armies on standby. So it looks like those two are on the side of the militants, which means there is a route somewhere to get supplies in. So I will come out and say that I was wrong about Mali. I thought that Mali was aligned with the West. Apparently they are more aligned with the insurgents in Niger. By the way, interesting part of Mali is when they said that you're going to send you to Timbuktu, or all the way out in Timbuktu, or any other remoteness because of Timbuktu, that is in Mali. I'm looking at it right here on the map. Mali's presidency's statement said that General Modi has told his host he had come to explore ways and means to strengthen our security cooperation at a time when some countries are planning to intervene militarily in our country. So, we'll be watching that unfold as it goes. The BBC reporting on our evacuation. Niger, U.S. announces partial evacuation of embassy. From Christy Cooney. The U.S. has ordered the partial evacuation of its embassy in Niger following last week's coup. Hundreds of foreign nationals have already been evacuated from the country, and on Sunday the French embassy was attacked by protesters. Coup leader, well, yeah, it's the French embassy, and the coup is specifically, apparently, against French influence. Coup leader General Abdurrahmani Tchiani has warned against any interference into the internal affairs of the country. Protests in support of the coup are expected to take place on Thursday to mark Niger's Independence Day. This is despite an official ban on demonstrations. France, the former colonial power in Niger, has asked the military junta, which is taking control of the country, to guarantee the security of their embassy. Crowds attacked the French diplomatic mission on Sunday, prompting the country to organize evacuation flights. More than 1,000 Frenchmen and other Europeans have now been flown out, according to France's Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu. One resident in the capital, Niamey, told BBC's Outside Source program that everything has been quiet so far. People are doing their duty like they do it every day, said Sidian. Yet there was military presence around some embassies and ministry offices, as well as the president's palace. So, and it's probably a good idea to get the citizens out. Maybe keep the ambassadors for now. But get their wives, children, and people who are tourists or otherwise. Let's get them up out of there. And Biden, of course, coming in and weighing in on this. From ABC News, Biden calls for immediate release of Niger's president amid apparent coup. Well, Joe, what are you going to do about it? From Morgan Windsor. Joe Biden on Thursday called for the immediate release of Niger's democratically elected head of state amid an apparent coup there. Defending fundamental democratic values and standing up for constitutional order, justice, and the right to peacefully assemble are essential to the partnership between Niger and the U.S. I call for President Bazoum and his family to be immediately released and for the preservation of Niger's hard-earned democracy, man. Alright, and here is actually, they're going to tell us what happened. On July 26th, a group of mutinous soldiers led by the commander of Niger's Presidential Guard, General Abdurrahman Tchiani, placed Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum and his family under house arrest in the capital of Niamey. They then announced on Nigerian state television that they put an end to the regime of Bazoum due to the continuing degradation of the security situation, the bad economic and social governance of the group, which calls itself the National Council for Safeguarding the Country, said all institutions have been suspended, aerial and land borders have been closed, and a curfew has been imposed until the situation is destabilized. Why is it, by the way, that every time they put a military back in charge, they always turn into authoritarian dickheads while they do? I mean, you sit here and you talk about freedom and trying to give freedom to more of your people, and the first thing you do is put a curfew in place. The defense and security forces are managing the situation. All external partners are asked not to interfere, Tchiani said, flanked by soldiers in a televised statement. My one big question here, and I don't know the answer to this question. Again, something I'll probably research after this, but like, what is the Nigerian economy? It seems like the majority of their land is sand, with a little bit of stuff out here in Fashi, Bilma, Durku, Aini. But like, what is your chief export? What do you run an economy on? And I'm not trying to make fun of them either. I actually want to know this question. I'm going to take the satellite out here and just have a look. Yeah, I mean, we've got something that looks like it could be used for farmland here in the mountains, maybe. Although it seems like it'd be too rocky, but... like, again, seriously, what do you export out of here? I'm not trying to be mean, I just want to know the answer to that question. Alright, a little bit more Biden news, then we will do things I like and things that I hate. From Fox News, I think that's going to be our big one here. I think I'll skip the Reuters one. But from Fox News, Biden's attempt to regulate pistol braces dealt a blow after appeals court cast doubt on constitutionality. From Bradford Betts. The Biden admin's efforts to regulate pistol braces was dealt a blow on Tuesday after a ruling by a federal appeals court cast doubt on its constitutionality. The Biden admin rule required gun owners to register pistol braces, which are accessories that can be attached to the rear of a gun to make it easier to aim and fire with one hand. Second Amendment proponents argue the braces make handguns safer and more accurate, but gun control advocates argue the braces could be used to lengthen a concealable handgun, making it more dangerous. What? Like, seriously, what? The regulation went into effect on June 1st, was one of the several steps Biden announced in 2021 after a man using a stabilizing brace killed 10 people at a grocery store in Boulder. That dude was a Fed, by the way. A stabilizing brace was also used in a shooting in Dayton, Ohio that left 9 people dead in 2019, and a school shooting that killed 6 in Nashville, Tennessee. They don't want to talk about the culprit in that one. 2 Texas gun owners, a gun rights group, and a gun dealer filed a lawsuit challenging the law. The Texas-based federal judge presiding in the case refused to block the rule, which required registration of the devices and a payment of a fee. But in May, the Fifth Circuit issued a temporary block of the rule as it applied to the plaintiffs, their customers, and members. The Fifth Circuit in New Orleans said Tuesday that Biden admin's rule requiring the registration for braces was unlikely to survive a legal challenge. There's no need for consistent application of the law, and this court may not have all the required facts, Judge Jerry Smith wrote, noting that multiple other courts have issued orders against the federal registration rule since May, and that it's uncertain of how many people are now covered by such rulings. The panel voted 2-1 to extend the block of the enforcement for 60 days and send the case back to a district judge, Reed O'Connor, in Texas. Judge O'Connor will now consider whether to block the enforcement nationwide. For now, gun dealers and owners are permitted to keep owning, buying, and selling these devices without registering them. Based. So, and again, you find an accessory. They come out and say, you're technically not violating the Second Amendment. But you are. And like for me, I prefer, and I've used a pistol brace before, I prefer not to use one. I don't know, it feels clumsier for me. I don't feel like I'm as accurate. And I can do just fine one-handed. Obviously, of course, I'm much more accurate two-handed. But I do just fine one-handed. Without a brace. But for people who want to go the extra step, do more accuracy, sport shooting, anything else like that, I mean, half the stuff on the National Firearms Act should be unconstitutional to begin with. It's just like when people say sawed-off short barrel rifle. How stupid do you have to be to short barrel a rifle that's made to shoot a long distance? Why would you saw it off? It defeats the purpose of your rifle. If you want to have something easily concealable, buy a handgun. Or steal one, as the people in Chicago do. And the last one on this from Bloomberg Law says gun regulators use flawed process to adopt pistol brace rule from Bernie Pazanowski and Bloomberg going against... Oh, I can't read this anyway, because even with archiving it, it's still hidden behind a paywall. How the hell does that happen? Usually archive.today can get around that no problem. Alright, that means we're done with the news. Let's do things I like and things that I hate. A couple things that I like and a bunch of things that I hate. Thing that I like today, number one, comes from Blaze Media. Tax data shows California and New York have lost the most income tax from people moving away. Good, you get what you deserve. From Carlos Garcia. An analysis of statistics released by the IRS found that New York and California have lost the most income tax revenue as people continue to abandon both states for greener pastures. The finding was made by myelisting.com, an online real estate portal, and also identified the greatest tax income beneficiaries of migration, which we talked a bit about this last week. The group calculated that California had lost about $340 million in 2021 IRS tax revenue. Despite its numerous attractions, from the booming tech industry and world-class universities to beautiful landscapes and cultural richness, California's high personal income tax rates seem discouraging for many high-wealth individuals, myelisting wrote. This, coupled with the state's high cost of living, will likely fuel a wealth migration out of California, the site added. The analysis said that Texas and Florida have received the most benefit in income tax revenue from residents moving in. And I'm going to tell you, you get what you deserve. Now, when you go to places, number one, if you're leaving California, you should definitely avoid Wisconsin as much as you can. This place blows. Don't come here. You will find much, much greener pastures in Idaho if you're coming from California and Montana. Check out Wyoming sometime. And Texas. But even with me trolling my friends in Montana and Texas and places like that, I will tell you people leaving California and New York and places like that, don't vote the way that you did in California, because that's the reason you had the high taxes in the first goddamn place. I'm all for you going out and making a better life for yourselves, but don't fall into the same trap that you did in the place that you were. And I'm happy to see actual financial repercussions to states pushing this massive blue state ideology the way that they are. It's about time, honestly. Another thing that I like today from my San Antonio, this is just funny. Buc-ee's plans to take action against knockoff store in Mexico. What do you plan to do? Buc-ee's isn't happy with Buc-ee's store from Priscilla Aguirre. And they've got, obviously, the similar logo, a similar sounding name. They call it Supermercado. Buc-ee's isn't happy with the knockoff version reportedly opening soon in another country. Someone in Mexico is opening a mercado that's an off-brand version of Buc-ee's. It's called Buc-ee's, according to a Facebook post from a local in Mexico. Ramon Matalongo told My San Antonio on Tuesday, on July 25th, the store is about to open for business soon in Matamoros, Tamaulipas. It's about 10 minutes south of the Los Indios Texas International Bridge, which is an international bridge that crosses the Rio Grande, connecting the U.S.-Mexico border cities of Los Indios, Texas, and Matamoros, Tamaulipas. Montalongo said the store will likely sell groceries like fruits and vegetables and possible national and international beers. He said they're set to open in a few days. In the photo he posted, it showed the store called Buc-ee's with a gopher as a mascot instead of the beaver from Buc-ee's. The photo from Montalongo reached a viral level on Facebook, receiving more than 13,000 shares and over 2,000 comments. This is the first time Mexico created its own version of a Texas brand. Someone opened a Guada burger in Matamoros as well, according to a TikTok from Luis Vasquez 3317. I am all for intellectual property. I will put that right out there, but I still think this is hilarious. And I do question what it is that Buc-ee's plans to do without making an international incident. Like, in all seriousness, how do you plan to go about this? I'm interested. I'd like to read your point-by-point plan how to do this. I'm not dismissing you saying that there's no way to go back and get this taken care of. It's just, you're looking into a separate country, an entirely different country, and expecting your country's IP laws to apply. And I don't know how you square that circle. But I'm kind of curious as to how to square the circle. I think the easiest way to square that circle would be, of course, to do like McDonald's does in literally every place that they go and put their own golden arches deep into the culture of the country that they go to, and then tell them, we own this brand, and we own this brand by your laws, so change your logo or pay the fuck up. Excuse my language. But I think that's hilarious. And the last thing, also dealing with Mexico today from NBC News, a manuscript signed 500 years ago by Hernan Cortez has been returned to Mexico's National Archives. Coming to NBC from the Associated Press, a nearly 500-year-old manuscript signed by the Spanish conquistador Hernando Cortez in 1527 has been returned to the Archivo General in La Nación de Mexico, Mexico's National Archives in Mexico City, U.S. officials said on Tuesday. The manuscript is a payment order signed by Cortez on April 27th, authorizing the purchase of rose sugar from the pharmacy in exchange for 12 gold pesos. It's a receipt. It's believed to be one of several pieces unlawfully removed from a collection of documents concerning a Spanish expedition to Central America in 1527 that is housed in Mexico's National Archives. There are a lot of people questioning whether or not this is supposed to go back to Spain because Hernando Cortez was Spanish. No. This is Mexico coming up and establishing themselves and saying, hey, look, Ese, we've been a trading hub for this long. This is our national history. Last week, officials from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts and the FBI participated in formal repatriation ceremony at Mexico's National Archives, where the manuscript is believed to have been unlawfully removed sometime before 1993. It's a violation of federal law to transport or receive stolen goods valued at more than $5,000 that have traveled in foreign or interstate commerce. According to investigators, in early 2022, a person consigned the Cortez manuscript for online auction at a mass auction house. Mexican authorities alerted federal authorities in the U.S. that the manuscript being auctioned appeared to have been stolen. So I'm glad they got a piece of their history back. I think it's a little bit funny that it's a receipt for sugar. Literally, a receipt for sugar. But I'm glad that they got it back at least. At the very least. Now let's do a few things that I hate. I think anybody... Oh, they didn't have the community notes on this when I looked at this before. So, a lot of people noted that Jesus Christ is Lord is trending. And Terror Alarm decided that they had to come back out and make it all about anti-Semitism to show you the disdain that they have for Christ and his followers. I will come out and say, even if you come out and label me as anti-Semitic, I will say the same thing. Christ is Lord, Christ is King. It is he who is called I Am. He is a part of the one true and triune God. And his kingdom shall have no end. I'm saved by his glory. And I give thanks for the fact that I'm saved by his glory. But Terror Alarm says anti-Semitic phrase, Jesus Christ is Lord, is trending. Why is Elon Musk not doing nothing while anti-Semitic Christian fundamentalists use bots to manipulate Twitter's algorithm and distort the trending page? Dude, there are 3,470 tweets with that in there, and a lot of them are probably people bitching about the fact that people said Christ is Lord. And community notes for the win, by the way. The phrase Jesus Christ is Lord is a statement of Christian faith that can be found in numerous passages of the Bible. It is not anti-Semitic. Thank you, community notes. Something that I think a lot of people thought I was going to talk about earlier on in the week, but I didn't because I wanted to save it for things that I hate. From the Blaze, school archery and hunting programs blocked by Biden admin from receiving federal funding. Which, by the way, meant that my my high school rather, would have been out of funding. Federal funding. Because while we didn't have a prescribed hunting program in our school, and a lot of them do. I think they do now, actually, in the school that I went to. But we did do archery. And by the way, given the fact that I grew up in a very rural area, I remember our gym teacher telling us that while we were doing archery, it was against the rules for us to bring our broadheads in from home and use them in the archery targets. We had to use the smooth arrows. This is from The Blaze's Candace Hathaway. The Biden admin's education department is blocking the school archery and hunting programs from receiving federal funding. Fox News Digital reported, well, I mean, if you had no Department of Education on federal level, a lot of this bullshit would go away. Last year, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 was amended to prevent federal school funding from being used to provide training in the use of dangerous weapon. But I thought you said that training was the be-all, end-all and everybody had to have training. And that would make everything safer if you required training. That is the piece of rhetoric that you guys were putting out before 20 seconds ago. The amendment, included in gun control legislation passed and signed into law in June 2022, aimed to promote safer, more inclusive, and positive school environment for all students, educators, and school staff, the Education Department stated in a press release. The legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, passed the House in a 234 to 193 vote and the Senate in a 65 to 33 vote, with many Republicans, like Romney, crossing party lines to support the measure following the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde. Cornyn and Tom Tillis penned a letter to Education Secretary Miguel Cardona this month, stating they believe the Department of Education is misinterpreting the BSCA provision regarding school funding. No, they're not. They're not misinterpreting it. They're doing it on purpose. Misinterpreting means that there's no malice. They are doing it on purpose. The senators noted that it was intended to prevent education funds from being used for school resource officer training, which is funded under a different provision. No, they did it on purpose. There is malice here. And the Democrats that everybody loves to hate, although I guess Sinema is an independent now, that all the Democrats love to hate, Sinema and Manchin rebuked Biden admin's attack on school archery and hunting programs as a gross misinterpretation. From Thomas Catenacci, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are warning that the Biden admin is clearly misinterpreting a bipartisan law passed last year as it works to withhold funding from schools that offer hunting and archery courses. No, again, they're doing it on purpose. This is not a misinterpretation. The warning comes from two senators after Fox News Digital reported the Department of Education is interpreting the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to preclude federal funding for school hunter education and archery programs nationwide. Cornyn and Tillis, who both sponsored the bill with Sinema, Chris Murphy, have also criticized the admin for the BSCA implementation. We agree with Cornyn and Tillis. This is not congressional intent. Hunting and archery classes should be eligible for funding and not penalized. And we are working with lawmakers on both sides of the admin to ensure it gets fixed. Hannah Hurley, a spokesperson for Sinema, told Fox News Digital. Again, if you just eliminated the Department of Education, which you should have done when the person that you hated the most, who is, of course, Betsy DeVos, came into there, that should have been your excuse right there to get rid of the whole thing to begin with. You wouldn't be having this issue. But you guys are not ready for that conversation. In a stunning lack of self-awareness by the government and the Associated Press, and I like this, by the way, but I hate the lack of self-awareness that goes with it, from the Associated Press. Supreme Court student loan decision will lower U.S. deficit, according to new White House projection. No shit, Sherlock. You know, that's actually been being said since they started talking about doing student loan forgiveness. Hey, this is going to raise the deficit. From Fatima Hussein, Supreme Court, ruling that upended President Biden's plan to forgive student loan debt changed his budget math, modestly lowering the projected deficit for this year, his budget office reported on Friday. The White House expects to pare back $259 billion in spending that otherwise would have gone to erasing student loans. It was higher than that, by the way. This contributed to lowering the expected red ink this year under Biden's budget plan from $1.569 trillion to $1.543 trillion. Hey, look, I got a low deficit, man. Jeez. We're still 1.543 trillion in the red. What are you spending it on? The OMB's mid-session review represents the admin's first recalculations of the loan program since the court's June decision, which will affect millions of borrowers. Yeah, and everybody told you this was going to happen. The American people, with no economic training, knew that this would reduce the deficit, and doing this would blow out the deficit. It's not a mystery. Oh, you don't go out and spend $29 billion, and it's going to be more than that, by the way. You don't go out and spend all that money? The deficit goes down, you morons. More things that I hate. From the Blaze, blue state law targets crisis pregnancy centers and politically motivated attempt to silence pro-life speech, critics say. And I have not had a chance, by the way, to volunteer, but I have been under the direction of Jessica Green looking for pro-life pregnancy centers to volunteer for in my area. I found a couple, I just have not had a chance to get over there because I work all the time. Candace Hathaway reporting again. Last week, Illinois signed a new bill into law that targets crisis pregnancy centers, empowering the state AG to investigate misinformation and deceptive attacks complaints. Critics say the Democrat-backed legislation is politically motivated to attempt to silence pro-life speech. J.B. Pritzker signed the Deceptive Practices of Limited Services Pregnancy Centers Act into law on Thursday. The new bill seeks to crack down on pregnancy centers that do not support or provide abortions. Why? They can go to the local Planned Parenthood if they want that. Or a hospital. Or any other medical facility. The law, enacted under the guise of consumer protection, would allow the state attorney general to investigate and prosecute crisis pregnancy centers focused on engaging in manipulation or misinformation tactics. The pregnancy centers could face fines of up to $50,000. Women need access to comprehensive, fact-based health care when making critical decisions about their own health, not manipulation or misinformation. Now get on the table and slaughter your child. From politically motivated, not medical actors, Pritzker said. Okay, are there actually non-medical actors in these crisis pregnancy centers? I've never been to one. Because I've never been in that situation. I have no kids. Is this actually a thing? According to Illinois AG Kwame Raoul, the law expands the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act to apply to crisis pregnancy centers, which he claimed are known for spreading misinformation to deter women from seeking abortions. This is fucking disgusting. I will go full disclosure and say I didn't pre-read this, so I had no idea what I was coming into, except for the fact that it was Illinois. Pritzker was being an asshole and protecting the slaughter of innocent children. Let's just do a couple more here. Not opening the article, but I still wanted to come out here and point out the Washington Post with their propaganda arm. LGBTQIRAMIGIXTBYAEIOU, sometimes Y communities in the Middle East face a growing crackdown, mirroring efforts by American conservatives to restrict the rights of gay and transgender people. This is that whole the Muslims are now right-wing thing again. That's all that I have to say about that. And the second to last one. So this, and again, I used to be a Democrat. I know what it is that they used to teach people in Democrat circles. The hate and the vitriol and the complete unacceptability of anybody who disagrees with your idea. And that was what the Democrat Party did up until 40 seconds ago. It's just like when Stacey Abrams would come out and deny and deny and deny and claim to be the rightful governess of Georgia. Except when she got her fat ass slapped this time, And now she came out and said, I concede gracefully. Because you know why? Because Trump never conceded. So they've got to change the narrative. Every Republican election has been challenged, or every election where a Republican has won the presidency has been challenged in history. But it's an evil thing to do because the January 6th people did it. But Brian Krappenstein, all I can say is the person responsible for this tweet probably shouldn't be handling the duties of tweeting on behalf of the Missouri Democratic Party. Which is weird, again, because this is how the Democrat Party has operated up until 10 seconds ago. The Missouri Democrats, of course, the roof is on fire. We don't need water. Let the insert your word burn. Of course, revealing a picture by John Cooper, who does have me blocked on Twitter, so thank you for the screen grab for that, saying, what would you do if this was your next door neighbor? And again, what Krassenstein forgets, and I haven't forgotten, is that was the norm in the Democrat Party up until 10 seconds ago. Up until everyone started crying and screaming and gnashing of teeth about mean tweets. That's exactly how they were up until all this came out. And now they have to come back and, we have to be the moral betters. We'll still go in our closed-door meetings and say that Republicans are evil and we need to just let them burn and let them die and let them kill themselves off because they won't take the vaccine. But in public, we'll have compassion. They are still the same way. And the Missouri Democrats post proves that. So Krassenstein, you can take your we've got to be the better people thing and shove it directly up your ass. Because I know better. I used to be among your ranks. And the last one, coming from the USA Today. Last thing that I hate today. Police tied a decades-old gun shop in Indiana. Hundreds of Chicago crimes. It's shutting down. From Grace Hauk. This is the fallacy, by the way. That all the guns are coming over. They're illegally from Indiana. A northern Indiana gun shop police have called a key supplier of Chicago's criminal firearms market announced this week it is closing its doors in what gun violence prevention advocates say is a win for public safety in a city that grapples with thousands of shootings a year. Westford Sports Incorporated in Gary, located 10 miles from the Illinois border, is liquidating its assets and has not finalized a timeline for closure. AG Timothy Rudd said on Friday. Store owner Earl Westforth, who's been in business for more than 50 years, is retiring, Rudd said. So it doesn't look like he's shutting down because of this, even though every town of America is taking a victory lap on this. It does look like he is just coming out and saying, I don't have anybody to pass my store along to, so I'm going to close it down. For years, Westforth was the number one supplier of out-of-state crime guns recovered by Chicago police. Fueling our city's gun violence crisis, Chicago City Attorney Mary Richardson Lowry said in a statement Friday, calling the store's closing a significant victory. No, somebody else is going to take up the mantle. And realistically, again, it's Gary, which is not exactly a high-class city. It is probably as crime-riddled as Chicago, except for the fact that it's got a much lower population of Chicago. So, the first thing I'm going to allege, and obviously to go back and make a full statement of this, I would need to have the proof, but this is not something I paid attention to for very long, is the first thing I'm going to allege is how many of these guns were purchased legally, stolen from legal gun owners, and then taken across the state line in Chicago by the actual perpetrators of the crime. And number two, if somehow Tim Rudd is sending these across state lines illegally, knowingly selling to Illinois residents instead of going through the FFL dealer like he's supposed to, then number one, why is the federal government not enforcing and coming down on him? And number two, why is Chicago and Illinois not enforcing the gun laws that they already have in their state? But I would be willing to bet again that most of the guns that were purchased at Westford Sports were purchased legally and then stolen by a home invasion or something. and then by somebody who came over into Gary, which is only 10 miles away, and then taken back into Illinois and disappeared onto the streets. The development comes after Chicago sued Westforth in 2021, claiming this gun store engaged in a pattern of illegal sales that's resulted in the flow of hundreds, if not thousands, of illegal firearms into Chicago, according to the lawsuit filed in Cook County. Okay, so you have a lawsuit, and yet the federal government, who loves to stick their nose into small business, didn't come out and say, hey, let's have a look around. Let's make sure everything's up to snuff and you're selling things the proper way. Because if not, you're going to prison, man. And if they've been going and doing this for decades and decades, like they claim, then you've got the W administration, or the HW administration, the Carter administration. I think this was at the tail, because they said it was 40 years that they've had track on this. The guy's been in business for 50. So I mean, even if you go back that far, you've got Ford, who was not necessarily the friendliest person to guns, Carter, Bill, Barack, and this is the first time we're doing anything about this now because of a civil suit from Chicago. I don't buy that this place was supplying like this. Again, I would buy that a lot of legally purchased guns were stolen in one way or another and then trafficked back over to Illinois. But I don't believe, and I've seen the federal government in action, I don't believe for a second that this just went under the radar for 40 years with several anti-gunners in the presidency. Call me skeptical. But they are shutting down. F in the chat. And again, somebody's going to fill that void. Like, this is not going to stop this flow of guns into Chicago. J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Davidson, the new mayor of Chicago. Brandon Johnson, not Davidson. Brandon Johnson, J.B. Pritzker. If you're banking on this store shutting down as being the be-all, end-all, and the salvation of the gun problem in your city, you're out of your damned mind. You're smoking something so good, I want some of it. Alright, it's been 2.5 hours. Let's get out of here. Quest Fanning always asks me why I start with things that things that I like and things that I hate. But he said I'd probably be happier going to work if I ended on things that I like. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I typically end the news portion of the show on something that destroys my faith in humanity. So I need to have that bridge before I go into stuff that I hate. That little bit of a bridge to give me some hope back in things, with things that I like. So, thanks everybody who came by and chatted in the live chat. It's been a bit of a slow night, and I understand that. I know a lot of people were here at the top for the Trump information, and once we got off of that, I think a lot of people lost interest. But there are other things going on that we need to talk about, especially with Niger and the pistol brace thing. But we'll be back here tomorrow with more news, more headlines, and more contemporary to see what is happening in the world. I anticipate a very slow day. We had a slow day after the Miami indictment and after the Miami arraignment. We had a slow day after the New York arraignment. But we'll see what happens there. Hey, maybe we'll get something else in the Biden saga. And then Fani Willis will have to jump up and save the day and throw that indictment down so that we can stop talking about what happened to Hunter over the weekend. I don't know. We'll see. I have no crystal ball. I can't see what's going to happen in the news. A lot of the times I'm just as surprised as you are as it's happening, and we'll go with that. Take care, have a good night, grab some dinner, call some friends, call your family, grab a drink. It's Thursday nights, Thursday. But regardless, have a great night. We will see you here tomorrow for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar. And this is Contemporary. Take care.